As you listen to these stories that happened in my hometown, right up the street, an area that I'm very familiar with, let's compare the consistencies between the Northridge Dearth case and this case. We have a home invasion, a mother and children attacked, we have a knife, we have the wrong person being accused. That person was justified. It's very interesting. I thought I'd share.
February 13, 1973, Northridge, Ohio, Montgomery County. It was a Saturday, and Gloria Buck started the morning making breakfast for her two youngsters. 6-year-old Tracy was a first grader. 5-year-old Scott was in kindergarten. On any other day, they'd be with their classmates at John Morrison Elementary School. But not this day. It was the weekend. Gloria was 26 years old. She met her husband Jack on a blind date. They were just a couple months shy of their 7th anniversary. But Jack wasn't home. He was off on a hunting trip with friends. The Bucks lived in a small green bungalow on Arthur Avenue. After breakfast, Tracy and Scott went outside to play with Jennifer Brown, a 12-year-old friend who lived behind them in a house on Harding Avenue. Gloria told Jennifer that a man was coming to see a television that she was trying to sell. She asked if Jennifer could hang out with the kids till noon while she negotiated the deal. But Jennifer couldn't. She and her dad had a shopping trip planned. She left the Buck home at 11 a.m. Seeing Jennifer reminded Gloria that she still needed a babysitter for later so she could go into town on some errands. Jennifer's 17-year-old sister, Patty, was usually available, so Gloria gave Patty a call. But Patty wasn't feeling very well and had spent the morning in bed. The two chatted a bit longer. Patty heard Gloria shout out to her two children in the yard that it was time to come in. Company was coming. Then Gloria told Patty about the man coming to see the television set. A moment later, there was a knock on Gloria's front door. She cut the conversation short, telling Patty her company had arrived. The pair hung up. It was noon. At 3:30 p.m., Patty's little sister Jennifer came back from shopping, and she hurried to the Buck home to show Gloria her new shoes. But nobody answered the door. That was funny, she thought, because the TV was on. In fact, it was blaring. Jennifer let herself into the house and called to the family.
Hello?
No one answered. So she walked further into the house, checking each room. Then she entered Gloria's bedroom. Gloria and Scott were lying on the floor, covered in blood. Gloria was nude. Tracy was lying on the bed, also bloody. Jennifer stood frozen, then turned and ran for home, screaming all the way. She told Big Sister Patty about what she saw. Patty didn't believe her. She put on her shoes and her coat and headed for the door. "Don't go," Jennifer said to Patty. She wanted to spare her sister from the image that she would never forget. But Patty headed over to the Bucks' home. She went to the bedroom window and peered inside. The scene was just as Jennifer had described it. Patty ran through the backyard and returned home to call the police.
What's your emergency?
The coroner will determine Gloria had been stabbed multiple times through the heart and lungs. Her skull was fractured and she was shot in the head. The gun that was used belonged to her husband, a .22 caliber Ruger. Her hands were covered in defensive wounds. She had put up a struggle, probably trying to fight for her children, authorities said. If she was sexually assaulted, That fact has never been reported. Her children both died from stab wounds, one each to the neck and chest. Jack Buck returned from his hunting trip that afternoon and found his home surrounded by deputies. His first thought was that Scott might have been hit by a car while riding his tricycle in the street.
Right here's Arthur Avenue, and the Buck house would be right here. And the Browns lived on the street behind them, which you could probably come to her fence and just yell into the yard there. And the school that the Buck children went to was John H. Morrison, which was in walking distance. It was actually right. It was right here. It's since been torn down. It's the same school I went to in elementary.
Off running for the front door, but deputies stopped him, put him in a cruiser, and informed him that his family had been slain. Jack was eliminated pretty quickly as a suspect. His alibi was rock solid, and he passed a lie detector test. Then, 9 days later, police announced they had found their killer. On January the 22nd, in a move that shocked the community, police arrested Patty Brown and charged the babysitter with delinquency by murder.
Oh my God.
Authorities were tight-lipped about what evidence they had or what motive they suspected. But residents only had 3 days to ponder why the Buck's neighbor topped the suspect list, because something new was going to occupy the headlines. On January the 25th, less than 2 weeks after the Buck family was killed, the Dearth family woke to start their day. They lived in a large brick ranch house on Diamond Mill Road in Brookville, about 15 miles from the Bucks. Dwayne and Odine had 3 kids. Maurice was away at Ohio Wesleyan University. 17-year-old Robert attended the local high school. And 13-year-old Linda Sue was midway through the 7th grade at Northmont Junior High. But there was no school this day. Though it was a Monday, classes had been canceled in honor of the funeral of former President Lyndon B. Johnson. And so Dad Dwayne headed off to work at K&F Metal Finishers. Mom Odine left to start her shift at the Farmers and Merchants Bank. And left behind were Robert and Linda Sue. Robert had promised his grandparents he'd prune their trees, so he left the house around 9:15 a.m. Linda Sue decided to use the morning to practice her cornet. She had a school concert the next day. Linda loved animals and doted on the family's pets. They had a Dalmatian and a cat. She was a Girl Scout and a member of the student council. She took tap dancing lessons and taught Sunday school classes to younger children. Her favorite song was Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. When the Dearth parents left that morning, Linda was standing in the hallway wearing a long nightgown, the cat leaping at her feet each time she took a step.
Raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling. So I just did me some talking to the sun. And I said I didn't like the way he got things done. sleeping on the job. Those raindrops are falling on my...
Robert was gone a couple of hours, and he returned home around 11:45. He went straight to the garage to work on his truck. But a few minutes into this task, he noticed the kitchen door to the house was standing open. That was odd. It was January, after all. He walked into the house and called out his sister's name. Then he headed for the living room. And that's where he found her. Linda was on the floor, nude, a bullet wound in her head. The coroner determined she had been raped and shot, probably around 10:30 that morning. The Dalmatian had been locked in the basement, a shoe print found on its stomach, suggesting it had been kicked. It would take a few weeks, but eventually detectives would compare the bullets taken from Linda's body with those found at the Buck family crime scene. They matched. Both attacks had been committed with the same gun. Detectives will find the two cases had something else in common. The Dearths had a car for sale. The 1966 Chevy Impala sat in the family's front yard with a for sale sign on it, but it was also advertised in the Dayton edition of the Trading Post. That was the same publication where the Bucks had advertised their television set. Despite the same gun being used at both crime scenes, and despite the strong suggestion that the killer may have found them both through a classified ad, authorities told reporters they didn't think the murders were connected.
Nope.
Patty Brown, the babysitter jailed after the Buck murders, was in jail when Linda Dearth was killed. And jail is where she would stay. Police insisted the gun used in the second crime could have been discarded or stolen after the first crime, and then used by a second killer. They weren't letting Patty go. The murders frightened area families. The killings happened in broad daylight, and where the victims should have felt the safest, in their very homes. Police tried to calm the fears, insisting they'd caught the killer of the Buck family. As for Linda's murder, Harlan Andrew, chief homicide investigator for the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, said, "We don't have a maniac running loose in the county," and that all the evidence we have indicates this was an individual, isolated circumstance. Finally, in May, 4 months after Linda Dearth's murder, Patty Brown got her day in court. After a 6-day closed hearing, a judge ruled her not guilty. Because it was conducted in juvenile court, the county didn't have to reveal anything about the proceedings. But now, Patty's defense attorney, public defender Richard Dodge, was free to unleash on the sheriff's office. Dodge accused the sheriff of botching the investigation, saying they never fingerprinted the holster from which the killer had taken the Buck's gun, that they ignored an eyewitness who had seen a car parked in the Buck's driveway that morning. He also revealed for the first time that deputies had another strong suspect that they were ignoring, a man already in jail, arrested on a misdemeanor charge of making obscene phone calls, a man who worked at a service station near the Bucks' home. Sheriff Kiter said there was insufficient evidence to link that mystery man to the 4 murders, and he accused Dodge of improper behavior for visiting the mystery man's aunt. Dodge called for the sheriff investigators to resign. The sheriff called on the Bar Association to investigate Dodge. Meanwhile, in the midst of this dispute, an elated Patty Brown was happy to share her experience with reporters. She had spent 103 days in jail, including her 18th birthday. While incarcerated, she made herself pants and a smock, which she called her going home clothes. When the judge released her, she ran into a room where her things were waiting, popped the buttons as she tore off her detention uniform, and put on those going-home clothes. In September of 1973, 9 months after the slayings, an 8-inch-long butcher knife was found hidden in the attic of the Buck home in Northridge. Jack Buck had moved out of the house by then, and it was being rented to a new family who told authorities they had never gone into the attic before. They found the wooden-handled knife wedged between 2 stacks of storm windows. It has never been publicly revealed if detectives thought that knife was involved. In 1979, 6 years later, the Montgomery sheriff announced they were giving the cases another look, specifically in light of some other area killings that might have been related. They said they had a new suspect in mind, a person suffering from a multiple personality disorder. They were trying to reach a criminal psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Messer, who had helped solve the Boston Strangler case, to see if he could help. But nothing more of that was said publicly. In 1999, authorities said they had DNA available in both the Buck and Dearth cases, but a test did not identify a killer. At that time, detectives revealed that they had 4 people of interest, 3 of them who knew at least one of the families. But they also acknowledged the killer might not have known the victims at all. The death of Linda Sue Dearth took its toll on the family. Parents Dwayne and Odine struggled to deal with their grief, and they divorced in 1979. Later, after both had remarried and both were widowed, they remarried each other. Odine became active in a local group of parents who had lost their children to violent crime. She revealed how difficult it was in the days, months, even years after Linda's death. She said friends kept telling her to move on, to be thankful for her sons. She said, "I don't care if you've got 50 kids and you lose one. Those other 49 don't take the place of the one that's gone." Odine passed away in 2021.